Okay,
All
we're
right.
recording whenever you are ready.
Thank you so much. It is October 3rd, 2024, 7 o'clock p.m., and we are now calling this meeting of the Municipality of Anchorage's Board of Ethics to order. Ms. Sleppy, if you would please call roll.
Mr. Bellerive,
Present.
Mr. Teagarden,
Present.
Mr. Neighbors,
Present.
and Chair, I believe that Miss Mogadam was excused. Would you confirm that for me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item we have on our agenda is the approval of this evening's agenda, and the board will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve this agenda.
And is there a second? I do apologize. Did we have a second to that motion to approve this agenda? And I believe Mr. Neighbors is still muted.
Thank you.
Mr. Neighbors, did you seconded that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. The question is on the the approval of this evening's agenda. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 And all those opposed? With none opposed, the ayes have it and the motion carries. This evening's agenda is approved. Our next item on the agenda this evening is new business. At 4A, we have a request for an advisory opinion, 2024-04 Gardner. And do we have a motion to bring this request for an advisory opinion under consideration?
I move that we bring this advisory opinion under consideration, 2024-4.
And do we have a second?
Can you hear me? I just seconded.
Thank you. And all those in favor say aye.
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 And the board will now consider item 4A, request for advisory opinion 2024-04. And Ms. Sleppy, who do we have this evening joining the call to discuss this request for an advisory opinion with us?
So it looks like we have, I saw earlier, Miss Johnson, Miss Rash, Miss Brown, and then on behalf, I'm not sure if Miss Miss Gardner's here as well as Mr. Busa from the attorney's office.
And does any member have, or from the board, have a preference with who we might begin speaking with?
No preference.
Yeah, no preference here. You can. So.
Well, I think with that, it may be appropriate for us to first hear a bit from Ms. Johnson. And I'm seeing here that we did have confidentiality waived with this request. Is that accurate, Ms. Sleppy?
That is correct.
And Ms. Johnson, if you would you introduce yourself to the board and perhaps give us a little bit of background about your your role within the municipality as the Housing and Homelessness Policy Manager?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. My name's Alexis Johnson. I was the Housing and Homeless Coordinator with the Municipality of Anchorage from October 2022 until July 1st of 2024. During that time, I oversaw the Housing and Homelessness Services Division in the Anchorage Health Department, and a lot of our municipal homeless efforts, as well as alcohol tax grant funding for substance abuse, prevention, child abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, and homelessness and housing efforts.
And so in your role as the policy manager for housing and homelessness there for the health department, were you primarily responsible for, I guess, forward-looking policy development, or was your role primarily focused on, bringing implementation of existing policy or kind of the municipality's directives and bringing those, I guess, to action?
Yeah, so I did both. At the Anchorage Health Department, I oversaw all the operations of anything that had to do with housing and homelessness or the alcohol tax funding, like grant programming. I oversaw 3 staff members who did the programmatic side as far as like reporting, alcohol tax reporting. And then also worked with the Anchorage Assembly and the mayor's office to develop homelessness policy that, advanced Anchorage as far as serving our homeless community.
And with respect to kind of working with the mayor's office and developing policy, what did your involvement with the development of policy look like, I guess, in your capacity as the policy manager here for the health department?
Yeah, so our division was responsible for researching new ideas, finding funding, communicating with the Anchorage Assembly at the Housing and Homelessness Committee meetings, communicating with the mayor's office on, some of the policy directives that were given to us from the assembly meetings, like safe parking lots, new housing initiatives, grant opportunities that were coming forward. Just kind of being the entity that really held hands with the assembly, the administration, and the Anchorage Health Department.
So in that capacity, were you, I guess, primarily advisory rather than having that sort of decision-making authority then?
As far as decision-making authority, I didn't really have much. We always just worked with the assembly and the administration to sort of find a middle ground. And then if either didn't support our policy, the mayor's office would tell us no, or the Anchorage Assembly would vote down initiatives.
And if any other members of the board have questions, of course, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, this is Forest Neighbors. I'm just curious why it is that the contractor, at least I'm going off of the letter that was addressed to us by Ava Gardner. And I'm just curious why Henning hired you.
I just applied to multiple entities that worked in homelessness. This was a field that I wanted to stay in when exiting the municipality. I also applied to Catholic Social Services, United Way. There were many opportunities that I applied to citywide, and Henning offered me a job.
Okay, I guess what I'm wondering about is, I mean, if you had involvement with Henning when you were the municipal employee and then you went directly to them right afterwards, and so I'm wondering what did they think they were getting when they hired you?
I mean, I applied to multiple jobs citywide. I don't know what they thought they were getting when they hired me, but I come from 3 years of on the ground work, and I wanted to stay in the field and serve the community in this capacity. And I applied to multiple nonprofits that serve this community, and Henning offered me a job. I'm not sure what they believed that they were getting, but I just had recent 2 years of experience working in this field.
Mr. Chair, this is Paul. If it's okay with you, I had a couple of questions for Ms. Johnson as well.
Please, of course, go ahead, Paul.
Ms. Johnson, hi. This is Paul Urvesty, the legal advisor for the board. My question was, do you recall when you first had any conversations with Henning about potentially coming to work for them? When that was and who you talked to? And then the second part of that is, did you take any, was that still when you were with the municipality, or did you take any official actions after those discussions began?
No, so I was terminated from the municipality on July 1st, and I was currently in the process of moving to Anchorage Police Department. Within 2 weeks, they rescinded that offer, and I had gone down and started applying with Providence. I had started interviewing with Providence. And then after those interviews concluded, I had spoken to Henning. I believe it was August 9th that was my first conversation with them. It was after Providence and I, the final interview happened. I communicated with Henning, and they had offered me a job. I believe I took my first day was August 13th.
Okay. Yeah, great. That answers that. So then, if I understand you correct, there was no discussions between you and anyone in Henning while you were a municipal employee about, hey, potentially you can come work for us at some point after you leave municipal service or anything like that?
No, that was never the communication when I was employed by the municipality.
Okay, and then the second question I had, can you describe, are there any actions while you were a municipal employee that would require like you signing off on any contracts or approving any operations of Henning, any direct involvement that you had with Henning in your role?
Yeah, so in my role as the program manager for the Housing and Homeless Services Division, I oversaw all alcohol tax grants to nonprofits for any of the programs that our division oversaw. So that's domestic violence, sexual assault, homelessness, housing. I believe there was about 27 nonprofits that I oversaw their grants and contracts. I never had communications as far as negotiating their contracts. That was a grants and contracts role in the Anchorage Health Department. But as far as final approval, it always went through DocuSign through me.
And if Daniel Beller here, if I could ask I guess a quick volley of questions, in your capacity as the policy manager, where I'm seeing that you oversaw the provision of congregate and non-congregate shelter services. Were any of those services that you were overseeing things that are continuing to be provided?
Yeah, so congregate shelter, our contract with the municipality ends October 15th. Non-congregate was done for the emergency cold weather shelter season. I believe those ended May 30th of the year before I left on July 1st. I think that's it.
And I feel like I'm making a kind of common sense assumption here, but any oversight that you had of, for example, that congregate shelter service there, your oversight wouldn't have included or doesn't include kind of a reporting period or an evaluation period that includes the time that you're employed or since you have been employed by Henning. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question one more time for me?
Yeah, and I'm sorry that one did wander a bit, but your oversight of the provision of those services wouldn't have included or doesn't include a time frame that overlaps with your employment with Henning.
No, so I have not. There was no overlap from my work at the municipality with my work currently, with what I'm doing for Henning.
And as far as, looking at invoices or approving invoices for projects and finding money for projects, are those invoices and monies that you had found for projects still being used or funding ongoing efforts by Henning that, you're involved with in your capacity as their employee now?
I'm not sure what funding mechanism is paying for congregate shelter right now. We did advocate for $4 million, but I don't believe that has kicked in yet. So I don't know what funding pool is currently paying for the congregate shelter site.
This is Patrick Teagard, I got a few questions for you if I can. You were terminated for service from the municipality?
Yes, sir.
Was this something that was expected, or was there, I mean, I don't want to get into your employee type issues, but was it for cause, or just was it a?
No, I was terminated by the new incoming administration.
Okay. And so the time frame was within the 1 year, but in your new position, are you representing, advising, or assisting for compensation regarding the matter of the Henning Incorporated?
Yes, I'm currently employed by Henning Incorporated.
Okay. And you're personally participating in the actual seeking that contract?
Seeking which contract? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the Henning contract with the municipality?
Yes, I'm currently employed by Henning working for them.
But you are personally right now, that's one of your responsibilities, is you're personally working towards that contract.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I think I've got the answers I need for that from this witness.
And I guess just a couple of more questions here, maybe just one more question from me, Daniel Bellerive here. The criteria that, or in your experience, in your role as the policy manager for the health department, in evaluating bids for new contracts, are the criteria or the factors that the municipality is looking at as it's evaluating bids for new contracts, are those criteria or those factors non-public information?
They're all public information. They're posted on the municipal purchasing website of what the scoring criteria is.
I had one follow-up question as well. This is Paul again. Ms. Johnston, do you recall any of the type of documents that you were describing that you said came across your desk through DocuSign, that you would have approved and signed off on, particularly involving Henning? Like, were there contracts that you approved or specific funding or grants or anything like that? What do you recall about the documents that you signed regarding Henning?
Yeah, so through municipal process, normally what would occur would be one of three things, which is an open market procedure, which is done in a quick instance where you call multiple entities, say, hey, are you interested in this? Can you give us a price of what you think it's going to cost? That's an open market procedure. Then we have something called an ITB where people put in bids. It's semi-informal and the lowest bidder will win. They have to be responsive, and then if they aren't, it goes to the next lowest bidder and so on. Then you have something called an RFP, which goes out to a scoring committee. You submit proposals, and they go to a team that's assembled, and they give you scoring, and whoever scores the highest is ultimately given the contract. So it's not just about cost. So during that time, Henning participated in one of those three types of, I'm not sure which one they were for which contract, but it was always fair and open. There was never, it was never negotiated by me. It was always negotiated by the grants and contracts team. They would agree on a price, agree on contract parameters, anything that had to do with reporting. And then ultimately it just came over my desk when everything was agreed upon by both entities for me to sign off on and go to the assembly for a vote.
And do you recall any of those documents that you signed off on, particularly as it relates to Henning? like anything that you approved on behalf of Henning or any contract involving them?
So I had final say on all alcohol tax related grants and contracts. So anything that Henning did for the municipality as far as sheltering goes, it would have gone through me and then ultimately go to the Anchorage Health Department director. So it goes through a slew of municipal employees, the purchasing director, the municipal law department, grants and contracts team, me, and then to Director Rash, and then ultimately to the mayor to be submitted to the Anchorage Assembly.
And then another follow-up question I had is, when you started work with Henning, was there any discussion about that you had with the leadership in Henning about potentially recusing yourself from any matters that you'd worked on behalf of the municipality? Was that ever a discussion, or was there consideration of particular contracts maybe that you had approved on behalf of the municipality that that you told them you shouldn't work on or anything like that?
No, to be quite honest, this was never a discussion during my exit interview that I couldn't go work for a government contractor. It was never agreed upon when I was hired. This was news to me actually, because I had applied to multiple nonprofits in Anchorage that I had worked with, that I had good relationships with, not knowing that this was going to be a conflict. So this was never a discussion until it was brought forward to me by this committee.
Alexis, this is Forrest. Look, I'm sorry. I'm just a dummy citizen serving on this board. We don't get paid for this. And sorry if I sound a little homespun here, but did it? I mean, you know, I'm not a lawyer. I never wanted to be a lawyer. But I mean, did it ever occur to you that by crossing over to this employer that used to be under your purview, that it would be noticed as a conflict of interest? I mean, if I were in the city government, I've never been in government as a paid employee or work for a government contractor. So I don't know how things work. I just know what I read. But I mean, didn't it occur to you that this might appear to be a conflict of interest?
No, actually, I think when you think about like homelessness, I really think it's like a niche field. And as far as alcohol tax goes, all the alcohol tax grants come through my division. And so if I wanted to stay in homelessness and serve this community, there realistically would there would be no options for me to continue to work in this field, because alcohol tax grant funding from the municipality goes to majority of the entities serving homelessness. I mean, there's very few.
So where does Henning's revenue come from overall? What percentage is coming out of the city?
I'm actually not sure. I could probably find that information for you, but
Well, you're a
receive,
director of the company. It's not a huge company, is it?
we have about 90 employees in the summer and about 140 during emergency cold weather season.
And you're not sure what roughly even an estimate of what percentage of the revenue comes from the city contracts?
No, I can definitely look into that for you, but I know that we receive federal funding, grant funding from the municipality, private funding, philanthropic dollars, private grants, foundational grants that we go after.
Were you familiar with what the law said, what the limitations of the law are about conflict of interest?
I wasn't until I was noticed of this hearing. That was not something that was discussed in my exit interview. It was not discussed when I was hired. I never signed anything.
This is Patrick Teagarden again. So let me ask you this. You had said that you had put applications out to Catholic Social Services and some other places. Were all of those organizations that you put applications out in a situation that you would be in a similar conflict right now?
Yes.
Okay, so it's fair to say that after your termination that in your field of expertise, you would not have been employable for the 1 year period as a result of this in your field.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And Daniel Ballard here, hate to piggyback off of Patrick, or off of Paul here from an earlier question, but where, sorry, I need to flip through my notes a little bit. You had discussed a little bit that really anything that had to do with sheltering would go through you and a number of other municipal employees, and I want to confirm it. It sounded to me like that was almost a series of checks that was ultimately you or any number of these reviewing employees could potentially be a no or a stoppage that keeps that action from going to the mayor and ultimately being brought to the assembly rather than you being able to be an approval authority. Is that an accurate kind of characterization?
It more so was a notice of, hey, this has gone through the chain of command. I'm sure there was spelling issues that I would send back or, incorrect math that was done, but it was never me writing the contracts or me negotiating the contracts. It was more so just like a check to get through all the way up to the mayor, if that makes sense, into the assembly. It just goes through a series of municipal employees that say, yes, we've been noticed of this. We've checked what we're supposed to check. Goes through the CFO's office to make sure the fund cert is there. It goes through purchasing to make sure that everything was done according to Title VII. It goes through me to, essentially just go through homelessness. But there was really no heavy involvement with me aside from double checking a contract.
Okay, thank you. And I think that I'm satisfied with this witness. Does any other member of the board have any further questions for Ms. Johnson?
I have no further questions.
I have no further questions.
And does any member of the board have a preference for who we might speak to next? I believe we have Miss Rash who's the acting director of the health department, as well as Ms. Brown, who is currently the special assistant for homelessness and health.
I have a request. This is Patrick. Is my understanding that Ava Gardner is the attorney for the city? Is that correct?
Yes, Patrick, that's correct. Eva is the
Can I ask-
municipal attorney.
Could I ask Ms. Gardner a question?
Let's.
I'm sorry. Is that okay, Daniel?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
I guess what I want to ask is if an employee leaving is different than an employee terminated. Typically, I would equate leaving as within resigning, quitting, and I just want to know, is there a difference in that from a legal sense?
Hi, this is Joe Busa. I'm the deputy municipal attorney, and Eva's asked me to step in for her. Has a pre-existing engagement she had to step out for, but I'm empowered to speak on her behalf if that would be okay for the board.
Yes, thank you.
She's on the list of participants right now.
Yes, no, she had dialed in to listen while she was available, but I apologize, she was just pulled away. If it's okay, I'm her deputy, and she's authorized me to speak on her behalf.
It's fine with me, Daniel, if it's okay with you.
No issue for me.
Okay, please.
So I take it the question is just, does the code draw a distinction between an employee who left voluntarily and an employee who was terminated?
Yeah, the code basically specifically says leaves municipal service. And I just want to make sure that I understand that leaving municipal service would include termination or not.
Until you asked that question, it's not something I had considered specifically. I mean, look, just thinking about the concept of leaving, I don't see any distinction between leaving voluntarily or involuntarily. I think both are fairly considered leaving service. And I think I assume that the assembly members who are writing this provision were aiming to draw broadly in order to make sure that all former employees are staying within the ethical bounds set out. So I don't see a distinction, but obviously that's also a question for this board.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And do any members of the board have any further questions for Mr. Busa at this point?
I have no further for her, Ram.
Forrest, have you got anything?
No, I would like to. I'm not sure. I guess executive session, so we could hash this out.
Would we have any interest in hearing from the acting director of the health department or Ms. Brown, the special assistant for homelessness and health, before doing so?
I concur with that, Daniel.
Yeah, I'd like to. I mean, I'm sorry to sound unofficial here, but I'd like to hear from the folks who requested that Alexis be questioned by us to find out why are the. I'd like to hear from them.
Mr. Busa, are you able to, I guess, speak on the municipality attorney's position on, well, I suppose that would be, the board's inquiries about the reason that we're having or hearing this request for an advisory opinion?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Ms. Gardner.
Mr. Busa, do we have any sense of when Ms. Gardner might be available to rejoin the call?
Thank you. This is Eva Gardner. I am here, and I apologize. I have some personal commitments, so there were screaming children in the background until I escaped to a different room. So thank you to Mr. Busa for covering. So we heard concerns from several different individuals, including assembly members, about this question. And looking at the ethics code, we felt that it was appropriate to bring it before the board to get a definitive answer so that the assembly could have that information when it makes the decision at its upcoming meeting about whether to approve the contract or not.
And Mr. Neighbors or Mr. Teagarden, do either of you have follow-on questions for Ms. Gardner?
Yeah, I do. Ms. Gardner, if Alexis were not with Henning, is that what the assembly wants to know, is whether or not Alexis will still be with Henning before they make the decision? I mean, in other words, the contract is tied to Alexis Johnson's further employment with Henning, or not?
Is that if the question is whether we're trying to determine whether she will be with Henning or not, I don't think that is what we are expecting an answer to. I think we are trying to determine or hear from you whether her involvement in this contract in the role that she has with Henning presents a conflict. And if it is a conflict, then it will be a question for the municipality to decide whether it is in the public interest to waive the conflict or not waive the conflict. And if so, that is what we're requesting an answer to. Not the question of the public interest in the waiver, just the question of whether she has a conflict under the ethics code or not.
And this is Patrick Teagarden. Now that we've got you there, Ms. Gardner, can I ask you a question about, do you consider there to be a difference in the code, it specifically speaks of leaving employment. I personally would, from just a language aspect, I would go over, and I normally associate leaving with a resignation versus a termination. Is there a difference from the code standpoint whether a person leaves, where it says an employee who leaves a municipality service? Does the leave encompass both termination and a resignation?
That would be my interpretation, and I think that there are some good reasons for that interpretation. Looking at that, I don't see that there would be a good rational basis for distinguishing between those two situations. If, for example, if somebody were terminated, it wouldn't necessarily make sense or be in the municipality's interest to give that person more freedom to contract with the municipality than somebody who resigns. And similarly, and this is not the case here, Ms. Johnson, as she testified, was separated as part of the administration change. But if, for example, there were an employee who, let's say, was terminated for ethical violations, it would not make sense to then give them the freedom to, take a position and in conflict with the ethics code and say that it's fine under this provision. So I don't think that there is a reasonable or rational basis to distinguish between those two situations. And I think that the language of the ethics code, if it wanted to, would have distinguished and said an employee who resigns or an employee who is terminated. Instead, it says leaves, which I read to just mean depart or separate in the language of HR.
So I think it does. I think there is a rational basis, Ms. Gardner, and that is that a person who leaves a position to take another position might have an intent to go over and to move a contract from one to the other. A person who's terminated is not planning to leave and go to another company. A person who's terminated is strictly trying to provide for their family. When a person is terminated and they're in a field of a very small niche, as Ms. Johnson talks about, they have a very limited opportunity for the number of companies they could be employed. And according to Ms. Johnson, any of the companies that she sought after, she would be in the same situation. And so I do believe it makes a difference. There is a rational basis for this. And I would like to go over, and I would like for to understand basically from case law and interpretations of the past, if there's been a difference between historically between somebody who's leaving and being terminated for other purposes.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'll, Ms. Gardner, if you could respond to us, to Patrick's point in mind. I mean, it sounds like you're construing the limitation on Alexis Johnson's further employment like a broad non-compete in the business world. And my understanding, I don't know the law, I'm not a lawyer, but I understood that well enough when I was in business that they don't usually stand up in court because that's basically denying the individual of making a living. And in this world, as Patrick pointed, it sounds like I'm not familiar with this niche, service area, but it sounds like if it's dominated by public money, everybody who has formerly worked for the city is going to be caught, has to make it. It's like it's driving somebody out of this field and requiring them to go do something else. Could you respond to that?
Yes, thank you. And before I respond, I would like to clarify something, which is that the municipal attorney's office is not taking a position on this question. So, and the interpretation of the ethics code is within your authority, not necessarily within mine. And so we brought this request for an advisory opinion because we had heard concerns from many venues, and looking at the code, we recognize that this is not a clear-cut question, which means it's appropriate for you to decide, not necessarily just for us to give an informal opinion. So we are here, seeking your guidance on this, but we do not take a position on whether this is or is not a conflict. But I do want to I will address the concept of a non-compete and just so you are aware, I do have a background in employment law from private practice before this, so I'm familiar with non-competes or restrictive covenants and how they work. And the question that we presented to you, I think, is actually narrower. We aren't seeking to we aren't suggesting that there is a reading of the ethics code that imposes a broad inability to work in an industry or a practice area. The question is really more narrow. Did Ms. Johnson's involvement in administering this type of contract for this service with this entity while she was at the municipality, is that the same matter, or proceeding as the contract she's now on the other side of? And so the question really is limited to that. And I think it goes more to the concept of how to construe matter than is employment barred. I don't think anyone would try to raise a concern with us legitimately that she cannot work in the field of, homelessness or providing homelessness services. I think it really is just the question. She used to be on the inside dealing with this type of contract. Is that the same matter as what she's doing now? And again, just to make it extra clear, we are not taking a position on this and we on the conflict question.
Ava, I'm kind of dumb. Could you repeat the part of your answer when you framed what you think this question is that you're presenting to us? You said on much narrower grounds. What is it again? Could you say that?
Whether Ms. Johnson's involvement with this particular contract with Henning, providing these services to the municipality, constitutes the same matter or proceeding under the language of the ethics code as a matter that she was involved in while she was here.
Same matter or proceeding.
Yes, and I can. I believe we quoted that language in our request for an advisory opinion that I can pull up.
Yeah, I
did.
Okay. Yeah. And I do apologize if the tone of the request came off more aggressive than was intended. We really are, again, just recognizing that this is the Board of Ethics jurisdiction on this question, since it wasn't clear cut. There was a clear cut answer to us, so we are presenting it to you for your guidance.
Ava, is there any need for evidence in your view to resolve this, or is this merely a interpretive burden on us? Or is there evidence to be adduced in order to answer that question?
I think that it would start with your interpretation of matter and how broadly you define matter. And then depending on your interpretation of that, it could require some evidence. I mean, testimony is evidence. So I think we recommended the witnesses who are available tonight as the people most likely to have information that might be relevant to you.
Well, floor is open, and as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to hear from anybody else who can shed light on this matter.
Well, if any other member of the board might be supportive of it, I would be supportive of a deliberative session to, I guess, distill what the scope is from the board's perspective of, what are we viewing as a matter in the context of 115, 130A. And then from that, and I would anticipate that would be a relatively brief session. And from that discussion, I think we have enough time this evening that we would still be able to move on from that and, meaningfully engage with any further testimony as we've narrowed the question to then, I think, have enough information to reach a decision.
And Daniel, this is Patrick. I could support that right there, although we do have two witnesses that are here, and I believe earlier you had stated we should continue with them. I actually have, I guess I would like to go over and to ask questions of them before we separate, because they're waiting for us.
Certainly, that would be a question
I
that.
support that. And, you know, they're here now, so I would be open to hearing from them.
And
And
Ms.
this is
Gardner,
Eva
I see
Gardner.
you
May
have your
I
hand
jump?
raised there. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And I am very sorry about this, but I, I, we sincerely appreciate the speed with which you scheduled this meeting and your willingness to work with the timeline that the assembly needs on this. I will apologize though, it was short notice scheduling and it is Rosh Hashanah, and I do have prior religious commitments this evening, so which is why Mr. Busa is on the phone. So with your permission, I would appreciate the ability to delegate the rest of my office's role to him for the duration of this proceeding.
Take no issue with that, Mr. Teagarden, neighbors.
I have no issue.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Gardner.
Thank you very much for your understanding. And again, thank you so much for convening tonight and being willing to work with this timeline.
From this point, do we still have Ms. Rash on the line?
Yes, I'm still here.
Excellent. And Ms. Rash, you are the acting director of the health department, and I understand you're able to intelligently speak to Ms. Johnson's actions while she was a municipal employee and her interactions with the health department on behalf of Henning Incorporated after she left municipal employment. Is that accurate?
Yes, I am the acting director for the Anchorage Health Department, and she was employed here at the Anchorage Health Department under my purview. After she left employment, I don't have much insight to her interactions as a Henning employee.
I appreciate the clarification there.
Ms. Rash, this is Patrick Teagarden. I guess I just want to verify just that that her position at the time when she was with the municipality, that she was, as stated here, in direct oversight of the contractor Henning Incorporated, that she was actively working with them directly.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And at the time when she left, was the contract that is being issued now, was it being developed, and did she have any part in the development of the current contract?
No.
Okay. And so the current contract was established after she left, and so she was not aware or part of in any way of the development of the new contract.
She was not a part of the development of the contract. I don't know if she was aware of it or not.
Okay. Did the strategic direction of the municipality towards homelessness and the use of contractors like Henning, or did it change significantly after she left, or did it basically remain the same?
It remained the same because we still have the congregate shelter operations continuing.
Okay. So how long after she left, roughly, did the development of the concept for this new contract materialize?
I would say between late July and August.
So from your perspective, given that she left and it was a month later, do you think that she, based on your knowledge, would have any material information that would give her or the company she's working with an advantage?
I do not know. I do know that we, in speaking as the health department acting director, developed the RFP and put it out through competitive procurement.
While
Patrick,
she
if I could
was,
ask, could I just tag a quick follow on to your question there?
Daniel.
either assuming for the sake of argument, or even if she did have kind of material information about the, the contract, the negotiation, or even that request for proposal, would any of the information that she had have been non-public information, or does there even exist non-public information about those proposals, about those negotiations?
So currently, from my understanding, nothing can be made public until the assembly approves the contract through an RFP process. And so the only disclosures that can be made from the closure of the RFP before the approval by the assembly is how many entities bid on a particular proposal.
Sorry for interrupting there, Patrick.
Sure, thank you. So in reading this right here, it says after leaving municipality employment, Ms. Johnson became the director of strategy for Henning. In that capacity, she now represents Henning and its dealings with the municipality. So in that, did she serve in the capacity with Henning at any time? Was she any kind of a consultant with the city that came up with this these plans, or is she simply acting? Was she simply acting as any other vendor, just in dealings with the municipality? Did she have any special access?
She worked directly with many contractors, including Henning, in her capacity as the Housing and Homelessness Policy Manager until she left employment on July 1st.
It says here that in its dealings with the municipality and the special assistant to the mayor for homeless and health, is she in any kind of a relationship with the municipality, where right now through her special assistant to mayor for to the mayor, is that a current condition, a current position?
So I'm sorry, I may not understand. So she is the director of strategy for Henning Inc. and Farina Brown is the special assistant on homelessness and health for the municipality. Is that what you were asking?
Well, in the document I have here, it says that in her deal, in that capacity, she now represents Henning Incorporated, and in its dealings with the municipality Anchorage Health Department, and the special assistant to the mayor for homelessness and health. Is she currently a special assistant to the mayor for homelessness and health?
No.
Patrick, I think that might have been a unclear drafting in the letter here.
Okay, all right, sounds. I just wanted to clarify. So she doesn't have any current position in that. Okay. All right, I have no further questions for this witness.
Mr. Neighbors?
Yeah, we still have Kimberly Rash before us.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So Kimberly, I heard you say that you were Alexis direct supervisor previously. Is that right?
Yes.
All right, and so you will be, if the assembly awards this contract to Henning, you will be working directly with Henning. Is that right?
The health department will be, yes.
Okay. And when I mean, I understand when new administrations come in, everybody is from the prior administration is well, mostly, and new folks are brought in. And that's just the way it goes in politics but I mean, you all had a decent working relationship and all of that.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea why this was? I mean, why the particular interest in this case? Kim,
Or you asked, oh, sorry.
yeah, I'm directing this at you, Ms. Rash.
As to why there is an interest from the assembly on Henning Inc. and Alexis Johnson.
Yes.
I think it is because she worked very closely with Henning Inc. Through her capacity as Housing and Homelessness Policy Manager. There was some text messages that were presented to the body in May of 2024, in which Alexis and Henning employees are included. And I think that really looking at ensuring the safety and well-being of our unsheltered population within the municipality.
Are you aware of kind of the substance of those text messages? Sorry, Daniel Bellery here.
Yes, I have seen the text messages that are outlined in the AIM.
Can you summarize what they say?
Yes, they discuss items in regards to funding, to politics, to weapons, to boxing.
How did
When
the
you say
city?
Are these?
Sorry, go ahead.
I think we got the whole board asking questions at once. Mr. Teagarden, if you'd go first.
Yeah, that actually, when you speak of weapons, for example, are we talking about weapons in the shelters, or what's the context of that?
The text messages indicate weapons on individuals.
Individuals that are in the shelters?
That work at Henning and are in different shelters. Yes.
Okay, so it's okay. So that's outside of the scope of this right here, but okay. Was there anything from your standpoint in those that was inappropriate as a employee of the municipality?
Yes.
Or okay, so they were seen as inappropriate. And in what capacity inappropriate, just so I can.
As a municipal employee engaging with contractors in regards to those topics that I just spoke of.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Neighbors,
Daniel,
you are. Thank you.
I'm complete. Thank you.
And Mr. Neighbors, you had. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I did. Ms. Rash, do you know if the assembly or you would prefer to work with another individual at Henning?
If I would prefer to work with another individual,
Somebody different.
I would not prefer either way. I don't. I know that there is the CEO, and then there is Ms. Johnson as the director of strategy. It would not matter to me.
And
Have you or members of the assembly had discussions with Henning?
I don't know if they have.
Okay. Have you had discussions with Henning about the retention of Ms. Johnson?
No.
This is Patrick Teagarden again. Real quick, was the Was the text in any way connected with her termination? Or,
I do not know that answer.
okay, all right.
And Dan, if you're kind of getting back to the substance of the text, you
Yes.
talked about how your summary of those, discussed funding, politics, weapons, et cetera, things that might not have been appropriate for a municipal employee communicating with a contractor. Did any of those text messages, from what you're able to review or recall, discuss anything that was related to the contract at issue right now, or any potential municipal change or municipal policy changes, or even changes on Henning's policies or procedures that are relevant to this present contract?
In the text messages, there's discussions in regards to receiving reports and emergency rental assistance funding.
How did you acquire these texts?
They were presented from the body through an assembly meeting in AIM 81-2024.
You mean the assembly presented them, made them public?
Correct. Yes.
How did the assembly get them?
I do not know.
I'm
Well,
afraid I'm
that
gonna have to
sounds-
jump
I
in
mean,
front of
that-
this.
Yeah, I mean, this usually when we go over these kinds of when we do our work, they're rather simple cases, but this is getting a little bit this is a bit more complicated, because when the assembly is producing texts that I assume are on Alexis Johnson's private phone with the contractor, this is starting to sound like the assembly does have a dog in this fight. Can you speak to that, Ms. Rash?
I don't know.
Well, you're right in
Again,
the middle of it. I suspect you have an idea.
it was presented again in the AIM, and it outlined the messages and requested that the acting director look into the text messages in which the health department produced a report in regards to that. And then there was additional follow-up from the municipal attorney's office on that report.
Hey, Daniel,
Yes.
I kind of feel like we're going down a tangent that really doesn't provide a lot of information specifically towards the the code.
I'm inclined to agree with you here. And I think as far as the text messages are concerned, I've at least heard enough substance about them that I don't feel the need to explore that further as far as their relevance to our interpretation of the code here.
Yeah, I agree.
Daniel, this is Paul. I was hoping to ask Ms. Rash a follow-up question here based on some of her testimony earlier.
Of course.
Ms. Rash, so I just want to clarify. So have you had any interactions at all with Ms. Johnson within the last, month and a half since she's been working with Henning, where she was acting on behalf of Henning?
I have attended meetings in which she has been present, and we've stated hello to one another, but not with the non-congregate sheltering contracts, no.
Okay, so she hasn't, during that month and a half period, maybe where Henning was operating under the old contract, old congregate shelter contract that she had helped approve. She didn't take any official actions or steps on behalf of Henning.
With the current oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, working with the municipality. I don't know what she's doing with Henning, and I don't know if that's a matter for the board to really be concerned about. It's what is she doing when she's interacting with the municipality? Is she taking
does-
any?
Sorry.
No, sorry.
Okay.
Is she taking any official actions where she's acting on behalf of Henning regarding that congregate shelter contract?
Yes, so she does. So at the last walkthrough in which the Housing and Homelessness Program Manager was at the East 56th Avenue, Miss Johnson was there representing Henning Inc. She has also represented Henning Inc. At the former Golden Lion location when myself and Miss Brown took a tour of that facility. Yeah.
And then you said that the current contract that was set out for RFP for the new contract, she didn't have any involvement in that.
No.
Yeah, that's all the questions that I had. Thank you.
All right, and then otherwise, if any other members of the board have questions for Ms. Rash?
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Neighbors?
No.
All right, thank you, Ms. Rash. And otherwise, we have Ms. Brown, Special Assistant for Homelessness and Health. And believe that she's able to speak to sort of a similar subject matter as Ms. Rash was. Ms. Brown?
Good evening. I can specifically speak to my engagements with Ms. Johnson after she left municipal employment. And just for clarity, I began my employment with the administration on August 5th.
This is Patrick Teagarden. I have a, do you, from your interactions with Ms. Johnson, do you perceive or have you heard of that she has any special information or inside information from her employment in the municipality that would give Henning a specific advantage?
No.
For this contract, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. That's all I have, Daniel.
And I hate to say it, that's exactly the question I would have asked. Mr. Neighbors, have you anything?
No.
And just to put a bow on it, having heard our discussions with our other witnesses this evening, do you feel that there's anything that you're able to add to this discussion or anything that we should have asked you this evening, Ms. Brown?
Given my limited interactions with Ms. Johnson, I do not have anything of value to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And one last one, Mr. Urbasti.
Oh, I was just kind of hoping to get a summary if Ms. Brown could just tell us. So I think before the question, she was going to explain what exactly what interaction she's had with Ms. Johnson.
Correct. In my engagements with Ms. Johnson, it has been related to the continued leasing of the Golden Lion, specifically participated in the tour of that facility. She also participated as an employee of Henning in a site tour of the 56th Avenue Congregate Shelter. We have had communications in my official capacity as the Special Assistant on Homelessness regarding a request for abatement. And Ms. Johnson has also represented Henning in a series of behavioral health convenings that I facilitated, where she participated again as a representative of Henning.
Most of us are probably not familiar, but what is a behavioral health convening?
Oh, I apologize. It is a series of meetings with local behavioral health providers that engage in both mental health and addictions treatment, as well as our kind of ancillary providers that do outreach and linkage, including partners from APD, as well as partners from the fire department. And it was just an opportunity to really start to establish a behavioral health referral network amongst these providers that offer services within the homelessness space, because there's just a tremendous challenge in linking individuals who are experiencing homelessness with necessary services, specifically mental health and addictions treatment. And so this was just an opportunity to bring providers together to get to know each other, establish these relationships, identify kind of a baseline core group of service providers that would be willing to accept referrals, and then establish what that behavioral health referral network would look like, and to whom those referrals would go to, and a routine cadence of ongoing engagement with this group.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. So kind of as I understand what her interactions would have been with you, that maybe she's acting kind of as a senior executive, acting as the face of Henning, hosting some tours and walkthroughs and stuff when people come to see the sites, and maybe attending a few meetings. But are you aware of her taking any actions like signing off on a bid on behalf of Henning, or trying to be involved in the awarding of contracts to Henning or anything like that?
Yes, I participated on the evaluation committee for the non-congregate as well as the congregate shelter RFPs. And Ms. Johnson developed both of those proposals. So I've reviewed the information that she submitted on behalf of Henning.
And do any members of the board have any further questions for Ms. Brown?
That's Patrick Teagarden now.
Mr. Neighbors?
No.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Brown.
Thank you.
And Ms. Schleppe, I believe that we've now spoken with Ms. Johnson, Rash, Brown, Gardner, and Mr. Busa. Have we any other witnesses or persons of interest to speak to this evening?
No, Chair, that was all that was on the list for witnesses.
Outstanding. I believe at this point, the board would entertain a motion to enter a deliberative session.
So
moved.
Second.
And all those in favor say aye.
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 And all those opposed say nay. And with none opposed, the motion carries, and the board's prepared to move into a deliberative session here on request for advisory opinion 2024-04.
Okay, give me just a moment, Chair. I will get you moved into an executive session room.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Chair, you are back in open session.
Thank you, ma'am. It appears to be 8:44 p.m. We are back on the record in our open session, having returned from our deliberative session. And if there is a motion coming out of our deliberative session, the board will hear it.
Hey, Daniel, could you, do you have it written down right there, and I'll just, I'll follow it up.
Absolutely. So the board would entertain a motion for an expedited response indicating that the board finds there is no violation of the Code of Ethics and that a detailed response will follow thereafter.
So moved.
And do we
Second.
have a second? And all those in favor of this motion, say aye.
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 And all those opposed? Hearing none, the motion for an expedited response indicating that the board finds no violation of the Code of Ethics and for a detailed response to follow at a later date carries. And from here, the next item on our agenda this evening is member comments. Do we have any comments from our members?
None for me.
None here.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda. Go ahead.
Daniel, I was just going to ask a quick question. This is Paul here, but typically the response goes to the requester. Obviously, this would go to the municipal attorney who requested it. But would there be any objection to also sending it to Ms. Johnson, since it primarily concerns her? The expedited response indicating no violation.
I believe that with confidentiality having been waived here and given the nature of the requester, I see no issue with a courtesy copy being provided to Ms. Johnson.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that would be appropriate.
Thank you. The next topic on our agenda this evening is our audience participation. Do we have any members of the audience who would like to be heard this evening? Seeing and hearing none, the next item that we have on our agenda this evening is the setting of our next meeting. This is currently set for October 17th, 2024 from 7 o'clock p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And finally, the board would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Neither of the two of us will be on the board at that time, so I'll go ahead and give you a motion, but so moved.
Second.
And seeing and hearing no opposition, motion carries, and the Board of Ethics adjourns its October 3rd, 2024 special meeting.